Hi everyone, and welcome to this tutorial about getting your clothes onto the Metahuman. We're talking about clothes from Marvelous Designer into Unreal Engine via Blender. We're going to rig clothing for the Metahuman. So this was inspired by a set of avatar presets that I put together for Marvelous Designer with the Metahuman body shapes. So it's all 18 Metahuman body shapes. I've also added bounding volumes and arrangement points for each one of the avatars, allowing you to quickly iterate between clothes. Now, let me showcase what I'm talking about here. So we can grab any one of the avatars. So I'm going to take M, tall, overweight, male. That's what that stands for. And then I'm going to grab a garment, grab something that's just completely missized. And here in the 2D pattern window, I'm going to showcase how if you have the arrangement points on each garment set, so the arrangement point name, if you have each pattern, or at least the main patterns from what I found. If we look at this one, these pieces in the edge don't have points assigned, but the main pieces do. So this one here has a body back, same thing, but the bottom ones don't, and neither does the pleated skirt. That's okay because it allows us to just go 3D garment, retarget draping, as long as it looks like the main pieces of the garment are, so all these other ones are going to follow along wherever those top two are placed. And this will resize your garment to any one of the avatars. So I made this set with the idea that, well, first of all, if I'm working in clothing and I need a quick access to one of the Metahuman preset sizes, I don't need to worry about that. Right? And as you can see, without me doing anything to the garment, I've been able to resize it to this avatar. Now I can also switch over to another avatar. I'm going to go to the exact opposite, so female medium, or female, let's say short underweight, sorry. So there we go. And I'll hit 3D garment, retarget draping. To make clothing for the Metahuman, we need to actually have clothing on. If you want to sell it in the marketplace, you're going to need to have the clothing on all 18, or size to all 18 body types. And that's a daunting task to have to recreate your own garment 18 times. So I wanted to create something that was quick and easy, as long as your garment has had its arrangement points set. So that, as you can see, we could size this tennis outfit to all 18 of these with just a click of a button. So that's really a game changer for being able to clothe so many different body sizes without having to change anything with the pattern. Now there's a few things we're going to go over. So to do this process, we're going to take this clothing here, so this character here, which I actually retargeted by hand. I didn't use the automatic redraper or retarget draping, because this one does not have any points assigned. So it would take a minute if you assign it. So if I go here, body back center 3, you can see it's originally these points were as a way for us to quickly reset our garment if you needed to simulate if you need to take a step back and pull things off. When you normally draw something in Marvelous, you can draw it anywhere, right? But where it actually put that is way up here. That's not helpful so we wanted a better reset point where it was going to place these arrangement points. That was their original purpose. But now they actually utilize this retarget draping. That's, super helpful. And for all the 18 body types, I have I've added the arrangement points and bounding volume. Now this garment, like I said, I did not create this garment. This was created by a very talented, marvelous designer and costume maker named Nina Chernyshenko. She has a lot of amazing period costumes, which are perfect if you're trying to create a character. So I've been using Marvelous Designer for about 10 years, but I don't have time to do all of this at the same time if I'm doing other stuff. So I definitely will go to these. I'll post links to both of these in the description below. Now, the few other things you're going to need besides your clothing, you're going to need to get yourself Metahuman. Go over to the bridge, and you're going to need to go to the Metahuman presets. So I'll go to Start Metahuman Creator, and we'll launch it with the latest version. One of the reasons that to use the avatar targeter, retargeter, Marvelous Designer suggests that we should have a rig inside these, and because you can also pose them. But I found that the rig is unnecessary, and also like the Metahuman is constantly changing. It's quite complex rig, so I would prefer to get my rig directly from Unreal Engine rather than having a rig that that I'm sending to people. Depending on whatever Metahuman you're working with, you should get the rig directly from Unreal. So you'll need to have your garment, you'll need to have your Metahuman, and I'm just going to quickly show you in the Metahuman Creator how we should prep our garment. Now, there are multiple ways that we can clothe our Metahuman, and one of the easiest ways is to do a full body clothing. We're going to take the entire body mesh, bring it into Blender, and copy the weights over to the clothing pieces. I would like to also focus on a few things that you should do with your garment, preparing yourself before you go. So usually when we draw our clothing, we don't really think about where we're placing the patterns, and for a long time it didn't matter. It didn't matter where you place them. If we really want to get our clothing to be UV'd correctly in Marvelous, we may want to look at how we're placing the pattern, and that's going to help us leverage the UVs. What this is going to help me do is if I go over to the UV editor, now in this case I've already got this prepped, but if I look at this one here, we have to make sure that there's nothing outside of this one square. And using the 2D pattern window will help us. I'll show you what I mean by that. So right now that's the 2D pattern. If I go reset to 2D arrangement, it's going to show us that. And then if I go to fit 0 to 1, and like that, but we're losing so much textile density. We've got all this wasted space. And then on top of that, the garments are going to look more blurry. We want really to start thinking about, well, let's make this more of a square shape. Once you're finished with your garment and your simulation, I would do this. You don't need to do this as you're designing, but you should make sure that you do this as you're working. Now, if I go to UV editor and I go right click, reset to 2D arrangement, it's going to almost like pack it for us. So then we'll fit 0 to 1. And now we have a lot better. These all need to go in the same direction. So up should always face up. Don't rotate them. Also, they should all stay the same scale. Once they've been scaled, don't take this one and scale it up. Okay, because that will mess up all of the relational scale for all the textures, and then it won't look right. Just make sure. The other thing too to consider is down here, you saw this thing. I don't know if you saw that, but that's a CAD item, and CAD by default does not have UV coordinate. So you're going to find like buttons and trims, and this in this case is a top stitch. It's going to be like right there in the center because it does not have a coordinate system in CAD. Almost all the buttons and stuff like that were originally made in Rhino, so they didn't have UVs back in the day. Now they can generate them, but not so much before. So you'll have some legacy content that's sort of living in this area. Be careful of that. That will cause you problems in Unreal. Okay, so you can't have UVs sticking outside of this block. You saw something before where UVs on this one were like this, and this is what's called a Udemy workflow. You can do this in Unreal, but this is also incorrect because these are a little bit too big for this. So they've taken this and scaled it. Now they did it for the sake of textile density, but in places like, if you want to take this outside of Marvelous Designer, then you're going to have problems because this will be a different scale than the rest of the shirt. Udems allow us to go on to the next squares, and we can go on forever, but it's just up to you about how big you want your texture sets to be and how much detail you need to really show. Like movies, this is usually something used in movies. A character like Godzilla or some of these big Marvel movies, they'll have the model broken up into like 60 or 70 different or even 100 different texture sets. So the maps will be going across here 10 times and up here 10 times, and every one of these squares will be filled with a piece of the model. That's, like I said, for really close-up shots, for cinematic. Unreal does take Udems because, you can do cinematic stuff in Unreal. So there is a Udemy workflow. But you just have to consider that your names are correct. The other DCCs follow a very specific naming convention. You also have to activate the Udemy, like streaming virtual textures. So you need to activate that in Unreal before you get started. Make sure for now, just to simplify things, keep everything in this one square. And then also let's go take a look. For my metahumans, I just wanted to showcase, so these are the different body types here. And then here's the top for this process. I've removed the top and the bottom. I've set it to none. And the shoes, I tend to put them as flip-flops unless one of these shoes really works for you. If you have a character that's going to be wearing these casual sneakers, but just be wary that once you've put the shoes on the metahuman, the feet are gone. So there's no more feet mesh. And with this case, the whole entire ankle is gone. So there's nothing underneath these boots. If you have something you want to rig, we can rig that, and I'm going to have videos going over this later on. Then you can see how easy it is. But I tend to do flip-flops because that gives you the option of having the feet. It's also very easy to remove them. Main thing is the tops, no clothes, bottoms, no clothes, and shoes to flip-flops. When you're done, you can just hit, you can download. So I've renamed mine to Omar No Clothes. And I tend to do this with the metahumans because if you're working with them, I might need a clothed and unclothed version. Okay, so like I said, I will go over other tutorials about putting together the top and the bottom as a separate component. You need to think about that when you have like separate pieces of clothing. For me, the easiest way was to rig this as one piece, one body mesh. And this is by the way, just to show you, I won't go over retargeting to the third person player controller, but I just wanted to showcase a few things here. Now, we've hit in Bridge, we've hit download. Here in Metahumans, we have this set of folders. In your Unreal project, you'll have a folder called Metahumans that will be created automatically as soon as you download one. And then in here, we're going to type preview. And these preview meshes are like kind of like the root rig of the body. So it's, behind and you'll see I have one for each metahuman I've downloaded. I have a preview mesh that showcases, that's in the body size. Okay, so it's a kind of a shared common root unit. So I'm going to grab this M, medium, normal weight body, because that's what this avatar is. Go to Asset Actions, Export. I'm just going to hit New. I've done this a few times, but I really want to showcase that you need to turn off level of detail. Turn that to false. Then in Marvelous, we have our UV set. We have our character. One thing I wanted to showcase is that the materials could probably be condensed Now, I happen to know that the artist probably put these different materials for the sake of simulation, but once we've done with the simulation, we don't need to have these extra material sets here, so we can actually combine these. And this will save us a lot of space down the line if we combine them. We should also name them M underscore. So this will be the material slot for each one. M underscore belt, M underscore socks. And like the boots and edging, they don't need to be separate materials. So you combine that down to one or two. The soft and the regular just needs to be one. I would also rename them, and then you were ready to export. So we just go File, Export, FBX. Hit Export. Now, important thing here is that we select all avatars, single object, welded, thin, and unified UV coordinates. So you can set your size here, 4096, whatever, but just be careful about the maps. Now, technically, we don't need the diffuse map because all of these colors can be generated in Unreal Engine, but we won't be able to tell what is what if we don't have that diffuse map. The normal map is helpful, but the other maps, no, because they're just values. So we can recreate those values. We don't need to create another texture for these. If you're working with Substance Painter materials that you've brought in, they may have maps, texture maps for the roughness or the metallic or displacement or even opacity, so then you would need to include these. But for this, we're just using diffuse and normal. Okay, so the rest, important to set the scale to centimeters, and you can save it with files, it doesn't matter, and then hit OK. In Blender, we need to import our rigs. To get our rig, remember I was saying to look for that preview, we're going to go Asset Actions, export that, and then here in Blender, we're going to import both of those. So we're going to get that Kung Fu person, and then we're also going to import the preview rigs. And if we look at it, we can see it has a structure. So it has this null object, which is actually the name, and then this root underneath, and then underneath that we'll have this pose and root. The first thing is that we notice with this mesh, if I turn off this mesh, is that it has these vertex groups, and it has this modifier. And this modifier is what we call an armature modifier. We need to also create one for this, and we need to get these vertex groups from here onto this mesh. These vertex groups are telling the bones which part they control. So to see this, we can go to weight paint mode, and we can just step through any one of these vertex groups. If you'll notice, they're exactly the same name as the bones. So there's the pelvis, spine, and it goes exactly how it is here. So basically, this bone has control over this area, and where it's red, it has the most control, and where it's blue, it has no control. It's varying degrees between 0 and 1. What we're going to copy these vertex groups from this mesh and put it onto this mesh. We might need to do a little bit of editing with weight painting. So there's a drawing, there's a blur, there's an average, and there's also a color sample. Let's go back out of weight paint mode, back to object mode. Let us now go back to our clothing, select it, go to the modifier tab, hit modifier, deform, armature, and you can call this root too. You don't have to, but the important thing is that you select the root rig that we're attaching it to, which is this one. Okay, so now it knows. But this model does not have those vertex groups yet. So we need those vertex groups. Before we can get them, let's parent this to its rig. Click and drag our clothing, and while we're doing that, we hold down Shift and Alt over the name root. When you do that, it's going to parent it to the same level as the body. We're almost there. All we have to do is grab our clothing, Shift grab our body, and then go to weight paint. You should see your clothing turn blue, and then go to weights, transfer weights. When you do that, you're going to see something happen, but you must make sure that when you do this, we change it. It was to active layer, but we need to make sure it's by name. The source layers is by name. It will copy these vertex groups by their name, and they will be exact copies over here. And there we go. There's our vertex groups. Now you'll notice this is a multi-layered garment. We can see that it's projected right through the clothing. You're definitely going to need to clean it up. The Metahuman has a much more dense vertex, so there's a little bit of stepping here. See that? That's because the clothing doesn't have as much vertices as, so it's kind of like pixelated colors. You just need to go in and blur or average. I'd say that's too much. You can play with the strength here and then go to blur and just go over it a few times. I would definitely, if we look at my character here, if I go to my third person player controller, if we see up close, we can see a little bit of this tear in the legs, and that's because the lines are very harsh. So if I go to, say, see, we go to these thigh, that all needs to get cleaned up. Right there is our problem. We definitely need to go average it around here so that it's not so strong. And like I said, if you need to sample, like there's that, and then if I go back to my weight, it's exactly sampled it. So that's super handy. But mostly you're going to be using, for this case, you're mostly going to be using blurring. We're not authoring a rig from scratch. We're just copying a rig that's already made for us. We're adjusting the weights. And really this is the art of rigging, is all about weight painting, set-driven keys. And there's going to be a lot of back and forth. Here we've got lower arm. There. So you'll see here that sash has been included in the projection by accident. And that's just the default way that it works. So we go here to weight, turn it to 0. It's going to draw a dark blue and then just draw over that. That bone has no influence over that sash and it will move independently, and that's more natural. Go through every one of these and make sure there's no overlapping or no really harsh edges. I would go through every one of these. Then now we're pretty much ready to go. We are rigged. The character is rigged to the thing. If you want to check, you can go to the root, select pose mode, and we go grab any one of these bones. We can grab the spine and go R. The character is twisting with that. Like I said, this is all where the art of rigging comes in. How these things deform when they're moving. You got to look at what's your character, how is your character going to move when it has those poses. What will the clothing look like? So you need to go through and just kind of find out what works best for you. Every garment is different. As you can see, I've done this process multiple times. We've got these characters here. They're all the same full body. I might go through and touch up some of this sculpture in Blender, like bring those bands out a little bit. I retargeted it by hand. Instead of simulating that in Marvelous, I may try to just do the editing in Blender. I would need to go through a little bit more. Really, we're ready to go. The only other thing we need to do is cut off those feet, and that's very easy. Just go here. I'm going to turn off the clothing, select the body mesh, go to object mode, edit. Here I can just select something and then hit control, and then X vertices, and that's it. That's the whole body gone except for the arms. And the arms aren't really poking through, so we're gonna just keep it nice and clean. Now that's it. Our clothing is ready. It's rigged onto the Metahuman, and the hands, because we've used a full body mesh, we need to keep those hands in there because there will be no hands on the Metahuman if we don't keep them. So we're replacing the Metahuman's body. I'll go back here and let's just check my bridge. Bring that in. So there's Omar, no clothes. If I turn this off, it creates a whole folder structure with all of the parts that the Metahuman needs. We also need to, well, now that this is rigged, by the way, let's go ahead and select hierarchy. So click on the top node, right click, select hierarchy, then go to File, Export, FBX. And here I'm just going to rename this. Okay, important that you have selected object. You can put copy or path mode, and you can embed your textures if you want, but I wouldn't do that. Then set the geometry to face, and the armature is remove the add leaf bones. It'll be on by default, so we don't want Blender adding anything to the rig. This is the Unreal Engine rig. So hit export, and if we look at our blueprint, here is our character from the Metahuman creator, and we can see the structure of the blueprint. So we have this root, which is that same root. Then we have this body mesh, which is the body, and then feet, which are the shoes, legs, and we notice there's nothing here, and torso. There's also nothing here. If we had put clothing, the body is the one that would only have like the hands and whatever parts of the body are still around after the legs and torso have clothing. So for example, if you have a metahuman with shorts, the legs will still be part of the body, the legs that are still exposed. If you have a t-shirt, the arm that is still there will be part of the body mesh. The different parts will have their different clothing parts. Like I said, we'll go over how to create all of these for the different parts, but for complexity's sake and to reduce the time of this tutorial, I wanted to show just those one simple solution, and that's the body. I'm going to grab this FBX. This is the one we just made now today. So when it comes in, it's going to give you a few options. Make sure you have skeletal mesh checked and import mesh. But the only thing you really need to think about is the materials. Do you want it to create new materials or not? And where is it searching? So if you have textures, if it creates new materials, it's going to create a ton of extra texture sets, which you don't need. But I'm going to show you. Happens with all those material names, and it actually, Unreal generates an extra set of textures for each material set, even though the FBX is actually only pointing to one texture. There we go. Now there's some problems with the naming. Again, like you really have to be careful about this because it created so many copies of the same texture set. It has a problem with the naming. But let me show you what we can do here now. So we have this Kung Fu person V14, and I have it selected. I might go Control Shift S to save everything, get rid of those squigglies. We can actually just hit this use selected asset, and there we are. There is a problem here. The socks are picking up the skin and the hands don't have it. That's real easy to fix. So we can go into this asset, skeletal mesh, and here we can see our material definitions. We can type body synthesized. This will help us get our materials from our character back. Now I don't know, maybe it's this one. So you have to match the skin tone of your character. The hands are okay. The other problem, I think, is the socks. What's happening here is that the socks are accidentally, because of their material slot position, are accidentally picking up the skin material. That's the whole tutorial. So we got our clothing from Marvelous Designer. We worked on our UVs, we worked on our material naming conventions. We brought that over to Blender, and we combined the rig with the body mesh preview, the body preview mesh. We combined the rig from that onto the clothing, brought them together, and brought them back into Unreal Engine. And now, like, the character is, this character can be posed. Go like that. The character's ready for. So you see here too. Oh yeah. So there we go. So that should be. Let's just type sock. There we go, and that's all fixed up. So these slots will on the character blueprint. The skin is actually the first one, and on the actual skeletal mesh, it's actually the last one. So we just need to swap out and point it to the right material slot. That's pretty much it. Like I said, if you like this video, like and subscribe to the channel. We're going to be covering a lot more on creating stuff for Unreal Engine, UEFN, stuff for characters, for animation, for music. different things for creating experiences in the metaverse. So thanks a lot, and I will catch you on the flip side.